Hello, and welcome to Microsoft Ignite 2023. We're a super cozy group, and hello to everybody online. I'm Lindsay-Rae McIntyre, Chief Diversity Officer and Corporate Vice President of Talent Development at Microsoft, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Ashley Llorens, Vice President, Distinguished Scientist, and Managing Director of Microsoft Research Accelerator. Ashley, thanks so much for being here today for this conversation to discuss how we're going to harness inclusion to innovate for the future that will ultimately benefit the world.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So why don't we jump right in? With all the innovation occurring in AI, how do you get true downtime, and what does that look like for you?
Downtime, what's that? Well, look, I just recently had a chance to go to China for the first time to visit our laboratory, Microsoft Research Lab in Beijing. And I spent a week out there. This is an annual meeting. And just breathtaking research advancements. I came home from that, and to my surprise, there was a sign on the front door that said, "Welcome home, Daddy," which was a really sweet homecoming. But when I do get downtime, the precious few moments, I do like to spend them with my family, with my kids. I like to draw with my daughter, play games with my son. Also, I still do research on my own. So it feels more like a luxury these days. But I just recently published some research in an AI conference, so maybe that counts as downtime too.
That's awesome. Congratulations. It is also the case that you have a new, bigger role and a bigger organization to lead. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your immediate and long-term vision for the MSR Accelerator and how it aims to drive us forward on AI.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about MSR. What is MSR? Microsoft Research is the part of the company that's really dedicated to pushing the frontiers of computer science and computing research more broadly. It's been around for about 30 years. It started as just about a modest group, maybe 100 so people in Redmond. It's grown up to be more than 1,000 folks in labs around the world, in North America, in Europe, and Asia. It's become much more interdisciplinary. We've got computer science, but also research across the sciences, design, social sciences, et cetera. So that's Microsoft Research. The accelerator plays two roles for MSR. One is kind of external facing. So we're the part of Microsoft Research that's responsible for connecting our research with the greater research community. So we really drive collaborative initiatives with academia, with civil society, with government agencies, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have a bigger internal facing role as well. So now we're really responsible for also helping our internal community come together across boundaries, across disciplines, by acting as a kind of internal incubator, almost like an internal funding agency. So that's an exciting new aspect to our role. Joining us in this journey now is the Microsoft Garage. So the Microsoft Garage is also now part of MSR and part of the accelerator. Of course, they're a global team. They're responsible broadly for the innovation culture at Microsoft, and they run the global hackathon each year. So that's just a really exciting partnership now.
It's awesome as I think about sort of the opportunity to continue to leverage the big brains in MSR, not only for the outside world, but also for the inside. Your job just got a whole lot busier.
I think so.
So I'd love your thoughts on, as sort of responsible technologists who are also cultivating emerging talent in this space through this unbelievable pace of change in the industry and specifically in AI. How do you think about the opportunity for us to grow and develop technical talent in the space and make AI better in the process?
I think having a robust and diverse talent pipeline is just so key for the broader research community, but also specifically for Microsoft. It's strategically important for Microsoft Research. We have a pretty unique culture. Culturally, we're unique within Microsoft in that we try to get the best minds in, and then we empower them to choose what they work on. So they get to work on the things they think are most important. for that to work, we really need the brightest minds. We need diversity and discipline and on all those things. And so for over a decade, we've actually run various talent programs. The MSR Fellowship Program is one of those. And over those 10 or so years, we've supported over 1,200 students with fellowships. Recently, we've taken a new spin on that fellowship program. So we're now running something called the AI and Society Fellowship Program. What we're really realizing that collaboration at the intersection of AI and society requires new perspectives from outside of computer science, from law, from medicine, from civil society, et cetera. So now what we've done is we've worked with our labs around the world. We've crafted 13 challenges, and we're soliciting fellows and collaborators from outside of computer science. So that's open. That's an open call right now. So if that's you or anyone in your organization that you know, we welcome your application.
I love that, and sort of the intentionality to invite and perhaps create equal access for everybody who's outside of Microsoft to help participate in these grand challenges, I think is an awesome invitation. Before I forget, there will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the conversation that Ashley and I have together, and so there's a QR code that you will have, and I hope that you'll pop your questions in the chat and we will take them. I'll remind you as we get farther along, but I just wanted to remind you so that if you're somebody who takes a little bit of time like I do to formulate your question, you can go ahead and do that while we're talking.
And so, Lindsay-Rae, I have a question for you. As we reaffirm the importance of having many diverse perspectives, what are your thoughts on the talk of some companies pulling back from diversity and inclusion? And how are we navigating this moment at Microsoft?
You know, I think it's interesting. At Microsoft, we've been doing this work for so many decades. I think that for us, there's no sense of pulling back. In fact, if anything, we're doubling down and moving forward harder and faster than we ever have, particularly in the context of AI. But I do appreciate the fact that not everybody's been doing this work for the better part of 48 years. And as such, you know, companies are in a bit of a different place. I think for us at Microsoft, we've been sort of both unambiguous and unapologetic about the role that the diversity and inclusion plays in the products we make, the technologies we're working on, the ways in which we service our customers and partners all over the world, but also the employee experience that we're committed to creating inside Microsoft. And so, you know, we think about closing the distance between lived experience and aspired to culture each and every day. And so for us, that means continuing to get more curious. We are the most diverse Microsoft we've ever been. But it's also, you know, an ongoing opportunity. I think people think that, you know, when you're deeply committed to inviting in difference and inviting in perspectives to your workplace, that's going to be really easy. And it's not, right? And so the ways in which we're intentionally investing in one another inside Microsoft to make sure that not only are we bringing in representation and diversity, but we're also equally focused on inclusion has been really important to our journey. I also have a ton of empathy for organizations who've been hit really hard by macroeconomic headwinds. And so to the extent that Microsoft and other companies that have privilege and resource can provide support to companies, we do. And so we have Microsoft's Inclusion Journey website. We just published Microsoft's Diversity and Inclusion Report for the 10th year in a row. And so we see this as a place where we don't compete, right? We're happy to share best practices and insights, but also really learn. I think for me personally, as somebody who spent the large majority of my career in big tech, I really welcome the opportunity to learn from smaller companies who are doing this work, perhaps for the first time or in new and different ways, because they, in some places, can leapfrog or apply innovation to diversity and inclusion that those of us who've been doing it for a long time can't. And so, you know, I think there's a perpetual place to sort of learn and grow. But I think it's also important for companies who perhaps jumped into this work a few years ago, have perhaps discovered the hard way that change happens over time and not overnight. And so the sort of the inning, we're in, we're out, we're in, we're out is in my experience not a super compelling strategy. I think, if anything, slow down, but don't sort of turn the tap on and off, because ultimately it is about making the words and the music match between what you say and what you do, and build trust and confidence with both, in our case, the workforce and the world in which we engage. And so we hold ourselves accountable at Microsoft for making sure that to every extent possible, what we say and what we do match. And that would sort of be my piece of advice in what continues to be a pretty friction-filled place in the conversation in 2023. So I'm going to turn the tides a little bit and ask you to share with us key learnings that you've had across Microsoft research over the last year. And there's a lot of conversation around the inclusion of data and the significance of data in building a more inclusive AI future. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question, because when I think about the value proposition for AI, and I think about that in the context of Microsoft's mission to empower everyone on the planet, and you really think about the breadth that represents. People in different societal contexts, people just trying to pursue different aims, people that speak different languages, people that have different abilities. And I think if we're to live up to that mission in the context of AI, we have to try to represent, embody that, all that diversity and breadth in training data sets for AI, for example. I've been inspired recently by the work of our laboratory in India that's really been doing a lot with language inclusion. So they recently published a report evaluating the competencies of foundation models on 80 different languages. And so, there's a couple of insights there. First of all, the multilingual capabilities that are inherent in foundation models like GPT-4 is itself amazing. On the other hand, when you think about the breadth, just the number of languages in the world, hundreds, maybe thousands of languages in the world, we have a long way to go. And there's some disparity between the reasoning ability of models in English versus in other languages that this group is really trying to close. In particular, they're doing work with low resource languages. So these are languages where just the representation, the digitization of artifacts from the language isn't there to be ingested in the models. There was one project where we're actually colleagues are going into communities and asking for their help in creating those data sets. So this is a kind of work, we talk about as data work. Part of the ethos of that endeavor is to make sure that's dignified work. And that their communities are really sharing in the gains of the work. Actually, the India lab just spun out a startup now that's dedicated to that. Speaking of low resource languages, ASL, American Sign Language. Now I know that you know more about this than me, but that's a kind of low resource language. I've learned from my colleagues at Microsoft Research, that it's not right to think about it as just a kind of English. It's kind of its own language. As an AI challenge, it's kind of a multimodal challenge. There's a computer vision component to it, together with a language modeling component. One of our teams has recently stood up a crowdsourcing platform so they can engage with signers to generate new data sets, and has demonstrated the performance improvement that you can get with more data. Experiences like that have really inspired us to embed that kind of thinking in our research ethics program. So, this is what we do, part of what we do to help ensure we have ethical design of research in the first place. And now our teams are asking questions through this process of, well, how are the individuals as parts of studies represented? More broadly, which groups are represented or not in particular studies? And what may be the impact of research on the broader community? So this is now part of our research design process.
I love the habit formation of asking the question of who's not represented in the data, because that in and of itself creates a curiosity and a place to go about intentionally inviting in or seeking out perspectives of communities, countries, that are not perhaps represented from the outset. So it's a great habit formation question in the ethos of how your team's going about developing the sort of the spine of the work. When, many years ago, early in my own journey, spent some time as a teacher for the deaf, and I spent time at Gallaudet University and was an interpreter. And the fact that your team has acknowledged that ASL is a language unto itself, and that it also morphs and absorbs cultural context, community context. We think about accents in English, and ASL also has that reflected in the way that folks sign. And so the complexity of nuance around language and culture and context to be starting there, I think, is really cool and quite complicated. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves for sure.
Yeah. Maybe one more thought on your question around representation. And we've talked a lot about representation in data sets, or more generally in the development of AI technologies. And I want to highlight for a moment the importance of representation in the evaluation of AI technologies. Red teaming has become a common practice with these new, more powerful kind of general purpose AI models and systems. So red teaming is where a lot of creative individuals from different backgrounds will stress test models and systems in different ways, looking for faults or looking for otherwise undesirable behavior. Inside of Microsoft, we've seen communities spring up that participate in this red teaming. I participated in the red teaming of some of our new co-pilots. But we're also seeing connection to outside communities. For example, colleagues at Microsoft recently worked with a community organization called Black Tech Street. So that name is inspired by Black Wall Street, so in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so colleagues have recently partnered with that organization to do a kind of community-based red teaming. So I think that evaluation is as important in terms of representation as the development process as well.
Well, in the co-creation, I think historically in the technical community, there's been this sense that, the big brains and technologists create a piece of technology and put it out in, an evolutionary way. And, at Microsoft, we, I think, call that dog fooding, and then we get feedback and we iterate. But I think the velocity of co-creation and the intentionality of co-creation for sort of towards the more beginning pieces of the journey in this technology, at least for me, has been really interesting and gives us an opportunity to, build and have a shot at mitigating bias upstream in the experiential aspects of AI, rather than sort of taking it in a reactive way. And I understand we'll have to do reactive work too, but at least for me, it's encouraging that we're innovating on the inclusion of communities inside and outside from the very beginning.
No, absolutely. We're talking about evaluation, and in AI and machine learning, this process of measurement and evaluation is so important. What does that look like in the D&I space? How are you kind of continually critiquing and evaluating in that space?
It's a great question. I mean, in the D&I space, I think we also pride ourselves in sort of our geekiness. And we think about this in sort of two ways. We think about it in sort of calculations. What are the data that we must have to inform the work that we're doing, places where we're seeing progress and less progress, so that we can be surgical in how we sort of interrupt and resolve for what it is that we want to affect change in. And then what are the conversations that we're having about not only the data, but also the experience that people are having in the workplace. You heard me say a little bit earlier that we just published our D&I report for the 10th year. And as a part of the evolution of that transparency and accountability motion of publishing each year, we take feedback from folks on what it is that they'd like us to perhaps share more information on, or be able to narrate as we cover sort of the calculations and the conversations in the diversity and inclusion work. Years ago, we shared manager data as an example, and the data didn't look particularly fantastic from a representation standpoint. But we did that because it, at that point in our journey, was a really important role that somebody could have relatively earlier in their career that would then lend itself to greater opportunity. And so focusing on manager representation was one way that we could think about fuel injecting opportunity. We've shared military data and disability data and further self-ID data as we have that data present in over 40 countries around the world, and then LGBTQIA+ data globally where it's safe to do so. But if I double click on military data as an example, I didn't decide as the Chief Diversity Officer that we were going to share that data, by myself. We really engaged with the executive sponsors of the community as well as with our employee resource group to understand the experience that they were having and whether that data transparency would be helpful in the conversation, but more importantly, lived experience, because military identity, depending on where you are in the world, can potentially be a conversation that comes with vulnerability. And so, we wanted to do that thoughtfully. The other example I would provide is where we provided transparency around median unadjusted pay. And that's a bit of a new math transparency for diversity and inclusion. Pay equity has been available for Microsoft for a very, very long time, as well as other folks. But the median unadjusted pay really shines a light on representation, particularly at senior levels. Because at Microsoft, we really are committed to having representation at all levels of the organization, but for us, really focusing on senior representation in particular based on where we are in our journey. And so that median unadjusted pay data, also holds us accountable to the progress that we're committed to making. We do also look at sentiment data. We listen a ton to employees, and many years ago, we embarked on the conversation of allyship, and like 60-something plus people in the company knew what allyship meant, and everybody had different definitions of what allyship meant. So we harmonized on a definition at Microsoft, which is to act with intention in service of improving another person's experience. And now 96.4% of the company understand what allyship is and understand what's expected of them in making Microsoft more diverse and inclusive. The other thing that we look at is not only required training, which we do have primarily to make sure that everybody at Microsoft understands what we're up to and what we're talking about in diversity and inclusion at Microsoft, but we look at folks who look to other learning material that we have in the system that is not required. And the use of that optional and voluntary learning data is up 270%. And so that's one indicator that says people are curious, they want to engage, they want to know more, they want to invest in their own experiences. And so for us, it is both the math and the calculations of diversity and inclusion, but it's also sort of the qualitative sentiment of what it feels like to work inside the organization and being diligent on working both sides of that. I'm going to turn it back to you for a minute. We've talked a lot about the intersections between AI research and the application of machine learning for real-world systems, and your passion and creativity for creativity in particular. Can you give us an example for sort of how the tech piece side of you and the tech professional in you and the creative professional in you meet up in this work as you are pioneering the way forward for AI?
Thanks, Lindsay-Rae. I think for me, for people that know me, they know I have a history as a hip hop artist, and that's really, and I guess I have to kind of admit to myself that I'm semi-retired at this point.
No, never.
But for me, writing good hip hop lyrics is about kind of lateral, divergent thinking. It's about saying something surprising. That's an approach that I've taken to my work in science and technology research. and really being innovative, not being afraid to be disruptive, doing something that's surprising. That's just been my approach. I also think about the importance of story. I think story helps you connect. It helps you connect to the why of what you're doing. And so for me, telling and helping others to tell a better story about why they're doing the research they're doing leads to better research and more impactful outcomes. So that's, those ethos from that side of me really, have really influenced me. In general, I think this is a broader point, or connects to a broader point about why representation is so important. Because our lived experiences really do shape the way that we pursue technology, science and technology. As scientists, it shapes our curiosities, the scientific questions that we answer and pursue. As technologists, it really shapes the problems that we try to solve through technology and the peoples whose problems we try to solve. I'm reminded of a recent talk that I gave. I've been making the rounds, as everyone in the AI space has recently. I was in Colorado. I gave a talk for a room of governors. But the most interesting interaction I had there was with a student afterwards from a tribal community. And he was really excited to talk to me because I was from Microsoft, and he wanted to tell me about how he was using ChatGPT to come up with a grazing plan. You had to, in order to get some cattle, I'm not an expert here, but you have to prove that you're going to graze the cattle in a way that doesn't erode the land. And you have to comply with federal regulation and local tribal regulation and policy. ChatGPT for him was really helpful in aligning with federal, but not so helpful in aligning with the local policy because so much of it wasn't written down, which kind of comes back to my point about kind of low resource aspects of data that we need to have represented. But here, I really want to see someone like him come into the field of technology and come to a place like Microsoft and work on solving those challenges. So I think representation is really key.
Well, and even in that story, I appreciate sort of the illumination of there are lots of sources of truth in the world. And I think, as the technology is getting better, we are discovering that, there are so many different ways that we can illuminate perspectives, experiences, understandings of. And so even in that example that, yes, there are going to be federal regulations, but how is it that we could be intentional and inclusive of the tribal community traditions and requirements in order to accomplish the expectations that that particular individual has as well. So thanks for that example.
Absolutely. Responsible AI research, and it has been super exciting to see kind of the co-evolution of foundation models and AI technology and responsible AI technology over the last couple years in particular, has really taken steps to mitigate harm by working in a collaborative ecosystem. I talked about, internally what that looks like and externally in the AI space. What does that look like in the D&I space? How do you connect with communities internally and externally?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of ways that we think about it. The first place that we start is sort of the neuroscience of inclusion, right? It happens to be the case in a company that has a massive engineering organization that's starting with the science of inclusion is a compelling place to start. And so, many years ago, we connected the momentum and work that Microsoft had done in its cultural transformation with Carol Dweck's influence of growth mindset to diversity and inclusion work because brains already had a sense of what came with growth mindset. With growth mindset, there came this understanding that you were not going to know everything all the time, that you were going to have to perpetually stay curious and invest in your knowledge, that you were going to have to be a lifelong learner around the workplace and around technology. So if we take those same sort of neural paths and apply it to diversity and inclusion, we've been able to get momentum faster than I think we otherwise would have because people's brains already had a sense for like, oh, this thing that I've been working on that I'm pretty good at can apply to this thing called diversity and inclusion too. And so, we started with the work of allyship because it is global, because it is ubiquitous, because it can apply to 220,000 people in 190 countries, which is the case for Microsoft. But then in addition to the neuroscience, we overlay external experts, right? I'm super fortunate to have a huge team of really smart people who are experts in their craft. But even we know that we don't know it all and benefit from experts all the time. And so sort of the co-creation, as you talked about, that unfold between the diversity and inclusion expertise that we have in the company that understands sort of the context and sort of how to engage with the Microsoft ecosystem in alignment with the professional academic expertise that is so necessary to help us understand what we don't know, to have a more full, more accurate, more robust set of conversations, I think is critically important. And so in addition to those global concepts, I talked about allyship. The other three that we've really focused on are covering privilege and unconscious bias as sort of global anchors, but then localizing them so that we can have a relevant conversation in country. Never would it be the case that we would want to export US paradigms of diversity and inclusion to non-US spaces. And so the diversity and inclusion conversations and experts that we engage in Australia are different than in Brazil, are different than in Japan, are different than in Canada, because the diversity and inclusion conversations are nuanced and different. And so it is a bit of a both and, right? That we have shared language and shared understanding at Microsoft for the core elements of the diversity and inclusion strategy, and then also make sure that we're having relevant conversations in geo, in country, so that we can unlock the lived experience of every Microsoft employee in ways and in relevant terms that are meaningful to them. So, those are some of the ways that we go about doing it. But again, it is this habit formation of intentionally asking who's not in this conversation that should be, where are the perspectives that we would benefit from, and how do we invite them in, as opposed to thinking like, oh, we know it all, because we absolutely don't. So when I think about one of the key considerations for how we advance AI and be more inclusive, I'd love your thinking on how do you and your team think about the range of perspectives, and how you help Microsoft consider the range of social and cultural contexts. I think for me, as amazing as it is to think about, there's also a grand challenge that underlies sort of how to ingest the whole of humanity into this new technology that's going to allow us to have a more diverse and inclusive future with tech than we have today. So I'd love your thoughts on what are some pragmatic, tangible ways that you and your team are thinking about chipping away at that grand challenge?
One of the things I think is really important there is to be working directly with external collaborators. As much as we try to be diverse and have a diverse community inside and reflect that diversity, it's really important that we connect outside. The role of the social sciences at Microsoft Research, it's been great. It's been a great learning for me to be among social scientists. They have been really critical in helping Microsoft Research and Microsoft more broadly connect with the outside community. Some of my colleagues, for example, are pursuing community co-innovation, where they're going into rural and urban communities and trying to understand how AI can be better fit to help them with the challenges they're facing. In one project, my colleagues looked at the role of community-based organizations in healthcare. And they play a much deeper role in healthcare ecosystems in urban areas, for example. And that's provided a lot of insights into how we shape our AI offerings there. That's actually, colleagues are spinning up efforts to go into more cities like Detroit and other places. More broadly, we really want to connect broadly with the academic ecosystem for many of those perspectives. We've recently initiated a program we call Accelerating Foundation Models Research, which is all about supporting academic collaborators with, actually we do this through Azure credit grants that provide access to Azure OpenAI, so the latest foundation models, and those support teams in academia. We've recently done, let me actually say too, that's actually part of Microsoft's commitment voluntary commitments to the White House. So my team stewards the academic engagement part of our commitments to the White House around safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. So we've got on that program now already we're funding about 100 teams spanning 75 different universities. They have this access to these models, and it's just amazing to see the innovation that happens. There's in English as a second language kind of co-pilot tutor that's being developed in one case. There's even an astronomy co-pilot being developed by another research team. We've got a call out right now for this program focused specifically on supporting research at minority-serving institutions. So historically black colleges and universities and Hispanic-serving institutions in particular. So this is a call that's on the street right now. And so if you or your networks could benefit from that, we invite applications.
That's awesome. Thank you for opening that up, and hopefully you all will be able to take advantage of that offer as well.
How do you see AI continuing to impact D&I and talent development in particular?
I mean, I think it's early days, but there's really encouraging work going on that suggests that AI can sort of take some of the administrative work of talent development and free up humans to do what only humans can do. I think it was particularly brilliant that somebody named Copilot and not autopilot, because to think that you're going to sort of have this helper or friend that's going to help you in your day job, I think is, at least for me, particularly interesting. But as we think about equal access to opportunity and using AI to help illuminate and connect people with career experiences that might be interesting to them, or help them understand the skills that they have today and the skills that they might want to secure for the job that they want to pursue next, right? To be able to have AI serve that up and be able to then build a customized learning plan or a skill development plan that is aligned to where you are and where you want to go, I think is particularly important. Managers will continue to be humans that light up, culture and provide perspective and unlock networks. But this is, the AI amplification of getting people access to opportunity, understanding with transparency what's needed to compete, and how best to spend precious time that you might have to advance your skills, I think is going to be really important, because there's going to be no shortage of, questions to be asked and places to spend time on, and yet I think everybody is in this place of feeling sort of time crunched. So AI to be able to curate with specificity, customized to the individual, so that they can spend their time most efficiently and productively in service of the outcome that they want for their career, is particularly promising. And the fact that we could do that in a way that would give individuals who don't have networks or don't have, a frame for corporate or workplace contexts to unlock opportunities and experiences for upskilling and reskilling for them, I think is important as we, unlock equal access to opportunity for all. So, we talked a little bit about this even in the co-design that we did with the team that built self-expression in M365, right? That you can now record your name, you can record a video, and if you want to, you can turn on pronouns, and that, that pronoun technology took a lot of work between the engineering team and the D&I team, in particular to create an ephemeral feature that was going to respond instantaneously, so that particularly individuals of the trans and non-binary community could be safe from meeting to meeting and context to context in places like Microsoft and beyond Microsoft that have to ensure contextual safety for the end user. So if you told me 10 years ago that I would be spending a ton of time with engineers on all things diversity and inclusion, I'm not sure that I would have gotten there inherently, but it's a lot of fun now. As we move to the last question, I hope that you'll queue up your questions so that we can take them. And so Ashley, as we wrap the session, I'd love for you to share your thoughts on the benefit of risk-taking, right? That so much of the era that we find ourselves in AI is pursuing unknown space with incomplete information. And so how do we what would your advice be on risk-taking in your own career, but also in service of harnessing inclusion for the future?
Well, I think this is really important. I think we're asking a lot of folks these days in terms of participating in this advancement of AI, and I think it's so important that we can. But it is taking a risk. You know, one of my professional experiences was founding the Intelligence Systems Center at an academic institution I was at previously. And even, you know, people come from different intellectual traditions across disciplines. You know, even getting roboticists together with machine learning folks together with applied neuroscientists, there's a different language. Even what we mean by intelligence is different, you know, across those communities. And so that was a risk, people coming together. Now, you know, from the MSR standpoint, I think we're leaving folks with two calls to action. One around our AI and Society Fellows Program, so working together across disciplines at the intersection of AI and society, and the other around our Accelerating Foundation Models Research Program. So we're now asking folks to take that kind of analogous risk. Someone in the law profession, come work with us on AI. You know, so I hope that you know, as a community, we can embrace the risk of crossing those traditional boundaries to work together. It's hard, it's messy. We speak different languages, we come from different intellectual traditions, but I'm really optimistic. Personally, I've really built my career progression around taking a risk, trying to go where I think my skills are most uniquely needed. And so I hope we can, you know, all benefit and embrace that sort of philosophy.
That's awesome, thank you. So we're now ready to take questions, and our first question comes from Nick. With AI tech being widely adopted by organizations with limited knowledge of its workings, what advice would you give end users to improve and safeguard inclusion, and what unintended risks do you envision? That's probably one for you.
Okay. You know, I think one thing I really love about this question is its focus on end users and applications. We do a lot of work at the level of foundation models, the foundational elements of modern AI systems, these general purpose building blocks. We do red teaming, we try to bring in all these perspectives. But you're right, at the end of the day, and I think this question recognizes this, it's how people utilize the technology that really is what creates the impact, positive or negative. And so I think, you know, kind of just employing, you know, embodying these values of inclusion in the application of the technologies, centering around humans, making sure that technologies are employed in a way that gives people choice and agency and empowerment, even as technologies become more powerful. I think if we keep humans at the center in that way, you know, we'll make a lot of progress here.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is if you are a technologist and you have, you know, the opportunity to co-create, to check your own power and check your own privilege so that we are intentionally inviting in perspective that we don't possess, as you talked about earlier. One last question. AI learns from its creators and inputs, including learned bias. What steps is Microsoft taking to prevent new and future AI tools used by HR professionals from inheriting these biases, especially when evaluating new candidate resumes or those who may be eligible for promotion? So this is probably a question for me.
This one's for you, yeah.
So, you know, I would say a couple of things. You know, there are a bunch of ways in which people have learned already about sort of where to use AI and where not to use AI in the employee lifecycle experience. And so for us at Microsoft, in the candidate acquisition process, we really are intentional about looking for as many diverse sources of talent as we possibly can, right? We don't only go to predominantly white institutions, we go to minority serving institutions, we go to, you know, places where there are not four-year degrees. We participate in new on-ramps to tech through our Military Software and Systems Academy or our LEAP programs, because the ways in which talent can contribute to the grand challenges that we're up to today are pretty infinite. And so I would say that, you know, to really think about how you're screening in new talent and not being lulled by sort of the biases or the archetypes that are potentially present in your workforce today. And then really using data as your guide around promotions so that it isn't about somebody who happens to be speaking up or advocating for themselves who continues to advance in the organization. At Microsoft, we really are data-led around the promotion process so that we can ensure that we're looking out for and advocating for individuals through the data beyond the actual humans themselves. So those are two small ways. I would also say that AI has the potential to also be an incredible accountability friend in making sure that we're constantly asking ourselves how we're mitigating our own bias to create a more diverse and inclusive future in tech. So that's all the time we have today. We're so thankful to you all who've spent the time with us and those of you online. We hope that you will take advantage of the offers that Ashley gave to participate in some of the open co-creation opportunities that exist through Microsoft Research. And Ashley, thanks so much for bringing your expertise and your perspective to this conversation today.
My pleasure, Lindsay-Rae. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.